For the people of Bayou Corne, a small community in northern Assumption Parish, the first signs of trouble appeared in late May. Streams of bubbles appeared in the water in nearby Bayou Lafourche.
Then in early August, a series of tremors led to the discovery of a sinkhole.
Since then, that hole in the ground has continued to grow, along with the concerns of local residents and the officials they're looking to for answers.
Tonight, Chuck Huebner begins a three-part series of reports on this history-making event. Here's Chuck with part one of the history of the Assumption Parish sinkhole.
I've seen a lot of crazy things in my 12, 13 years in law enforcement, but this is definitely a first.
Crazy. What else is there to call it when part of your parish is steadily disappearing into a hole in the earth? Scientists call them sinkholes, a geological event that occurs when soil or rock formation, sometimes hundreds of feet beneath the surface, suddenly gives way and creates a depression or hole. But Assumption Parish Sheriff Mike Waguespack describes it differently.
It's almost like a live animal. Every day it tends to grow and there's a different issue that develops.
For Sheriff Waguespack, the most immediate issue has been the mandatory and continuing evacuation of some 150 families who live within 2,000 to 3,000 feet of the sinkhole and have still not been able to go back home. Dennis Landry is one of those homeowners.
Nobody ever expected anything like this to happen.
Landry is also a local businessman who relies on this area for a living.
Yes, I have a boat landing, I have some RV spots, and I have some Cajun cabins, and it's kind of got my business upside down. I'm still rented to a certain extent, but I'm renting to the state agencies that are responding to the emergency. So I'm just hoping once this is all over, my customer base returns.
The problem is no one knows when that will be. John Boudreau, the Director of Homeland Security for Assumption Parish, says the experts are telling him this sinkhole is new science.
It's going to take the information to be collected and interpreted, and then we'll move from there and see if it is where the risk lies then.
Talking about.
Of course, that is Chuck Huebner reporting. Now, the story is not over yet. Chuck continues his investigation on News 10 at 6.
Thanks, David. Scientists working to stabilize the sinkhole on the edge of the Napoleonville Salt Dome really have their hands full. Although it appears that only one of about 60 separate salt caverns has collapsed, it still created an environmental nightmare that experts are still struggling to get a handle on.
One big problem is the aquifer that runs beneath the dome is now contaminated with natural gas and possibly even oil. Fortunately, the area's drinking water does not come from the aquifer. It comes from Bayou Lafourche. And as you'll see in this report, until scientists can find a way to safely remove the natural gas coming out of the sinkhole, nobody will be able to return to their homes.
Here's part two of the history of the Assumption Parish sinkhole.
When you talk with the various officials who are charged with trying to contain and stabilize the Grand Bayou sinkhole, a common phrase soon becomes apparent.
The experts have really never seen anything like this before. This is really just new science. That's what's taken so long.
This is the marshy area surrounding the edge of the sinkhole. If you look closely enough through the trees, you can make out some of the booms and skimming equipment that's been brought onto the site.
Biggest issue I see right now is we need to get some 3D seismic done. This cavern, the collapse of this cavern, about 3.3 million cubic feet of material has gone into this cavern. The sinkhole itself only accounts for about 550,000 of that material. So there's approximately 2.5 million, 2.7 million of material that has entered this cavern that's unaccounted for. Okay, so there may be pockets and voids, and that may be one reason why this sinkhole kind of continues to grow to a certain extent as things are settling down.
Thus far, some 960 barrels of hydrocarbon fluid and about 4,000 barrels of hydrocarbon oil have been produced from an exploratory well that's been drilled at the site. The problem that remains is how to get rid of the natural gas that scientists believe is still down there.
What's been a little frustrating is that we haven't had any success with venting the gas from the water aquifer. 4 vent wells have been installed, put in place. They basically drove some casing down to about 200 feet, have perforated that casing, but have not had any success in getting the gas to enter into the casing so that we can do a controlled vent.
Dennis Landry is one of those whose house is located inside the evacuation zone, next to Bayou Lafourche.
Now, so far, it's not coming up on land anywhere, and I'm told the land here is so hard and compacted and good soil, it's not coming through the soil. But it does come up in the bayous, and that bubbling has remained the same.
You see those tiny bubbles forming on the surface of the water? That's actually natural gas that's associated with the sinkhole that's about 3,600 feet away from this particular residence. And that's the primary concern here.
Worst case scenario, I guess, is if this gas in the water aquifer comes to the surface, gets under some type of building or structure, and hits ignition. To me, that's worst case scenario. That's why we have this area evacuated. Because, the gas is only about 100, 150 feet down. If it finds a source, finds an old oil well, an old water well, it'll basically come up to the surface. If that surface is, if that's inside of a shed or something off the ground and it's captured and is an ignition source, boom, we have an explosion.
For now, as the experts continue to work, officials like Homeland Security Director John Boudreau say,
We deal with it as day by day and continue on pushing forward to try to get resolution and mitigation to this incident.
Now, coming up tonight at 10 o'clock, we'll wrap up our series of reports on the Assumption Parish sinkhole by talking to some of the foremost experts who are internationally known for their work in the field of geology. And they're located right here at UL Lafayette. That's tonight at 10 in the history of the Assumption Parish sinkhole.
Over $2 million and counting. That's what's been spent so far trying to find a solution to the Assumption Parish sinkhole.
A 6-acre hole nearly 450 feet deep that has already contaminated the groundwater and continues to thwart the efforts of engineers and scientists who are working to safeguard the lives and property of more than 150 families who've been forced out of their homes since August 2nd.
Tonight, we conclude our series of reports on this history-making event by talking to some internationally known experts in the field of geology and the study of sinkholes.
I think we've kind of eliminated the scenario that it's going to get to the road or it's going to get to any particular houses.
Assumption Parish Sheriff Mike Waguespack says that's the good news. The bad news is the continued presence of natural gas both in and around the sinkhole will continue to prevent more than 150 families from being allowed to return to their homes until the threat of a possible explosion has passed. Dennis Landry is one of those homeowners.
At this point, I don't think anybody really knows exactly when it's going to happen. The gas is still bubbling. From what I understand, there's a little bit oil still oozing up out of the sinkhole.
Professor David Borak is the director of UL Lafayette's newest School of Geosciences. Professor Borak says sinkholes can come in all shapes and sizes.
And some in Florida and South America, for example, that could swallow city blocks. And others that are just small, where maybe a refrigerator or something might fall in. So you just don't know what the situation is because you don't know how big the caverns may be beneath that area.
Professor Borak says the sinkhole in Assumption Parish belongs in a category all its own.
This is a very untypical situation, much larger than normal.
Fellow Professor Gary Kinsland agrees. Kinsland says geological events of this magnitude are frequently beyond the scope of human control.
My guess, and having not seen it, is it's a process that's underway and we just have to stand back.
Sheriff Waguespack says the worst case scenario is another sinkhole could form or the current one could expand beyond control. Professor Kinsland says that's a possibility.
Anytime you dig a hole in something that's not very strong, like if you go to the beach, dig a hole, you can dig a very small hole the size of your hand, but the next thing you know, it's a couple, 3 feet across, as it collapses. So it could be a significant thing, and I'm glad I don't have to try to fix it.
Sheriff Waguespack is not so lucky. The safety of those in and around the evacuation zone who are still unable to return to their homes is his responsibility.
We're just telling them it's really unknown at this point. We're working with DNR. We've got a game plan. Texas Brine has been instructed to take care of some things, and they've got some deadlines approaching approximately November 13th on as far as coming up with a plan for the seismic. And to me, that's the biggest hurdle we need to cross right now. We need to see what's going on below the surface.
We would like to thank Sheriff Waguespack and Homeland Security Director John Boudreau for their cooperation in putting this story together. And we hope a solution to the ongoing problem there is swift in coming for all of those involved.